What do you got there?
Maximum. Treats.
Good treat.
Treats.
Thanks, Mum. We've had a pretty productive day so far. It's really hot, but we've got all our cabling finished. We've put the shore plug in, another vent, finally secured that front sheet of the flooring. And now we're moving on to the final stage of insulation, starting to prepare the walls for cladding. So putting some ribbing in, a bit of framing. So it's a bit of mix and match, but yeah, really excited to see this next step, as I think we're gonna really start to see the inside of the van come together. So what I'm doing now is a bit of prep work to put the rail on that's going to support our bed. So I've drilled out some holes here, and that's for some nut certs. They're either called nut certs or rib nuts. But yeah, basically that'll go in that hole. And then use the nut riveter, and much like a pop rivet, basically press it into place, and that'll hold it there tightly and give us an anchor point or a nut that we can then bolt into. And then there we've got an M10, and that's going to help support the bed rail in place. So we ended up getting a bit of an afternoon storm yesterday, and we packed up. This morning we've kept going. We ripped down a 12mm sheet of ply into these 100mm widths. So I don't know what they're actually called, but I'm going to call them ribbing. So this is going to be what's our support for our cladding. So that's going to be screwed onto the wall, except full height of the wall. And now we're moving on to putting those rib nuts into the walls here.
I like to be educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my loneliness. I guess that ignorance is bliss. Take me back to before the new. Rewind, take it out of cue. Innocence can be a young man's game.
This is our M10 bolts that we're going to use on our bed rails. So that's going to help support it.
How much I miss not knowing that we're all screwed. Stay up, I feel so outdated. How can we look the other way? Sun is out, but the sky is gray. What would happen if I took a chance? It's always hard at first glance. I don't wanna, but I know I gotta do it. The truth is hard to swallow, I think I'll chew it.
At the moment we've got a bit of a juggling act going on. We're putting in our final stage of insulation, which is a 4mm closed cell foam. I talked a bit about this in our insulation video. So this is a product by Amatalin called Thermaliner. So it's got reflective surfaces on both sides. That's going to work as thermal insulation. It's going to be a vapor barrier as well. And the way we're putting it in here, we're getting an air gap in there about the sort of thickness of my hand. We're stuck that on with some contact adhesive. Then we're using our 12mm ply ribs to help secure that in place as well. So we've cut all those to length. I've numbered each one of those as well, just to make it easier as we roll along from back of the van to the front of the van. So they're shaping to the contour of the van. They're quite flexible. So they're shaping to the side of the van quite nicely. So this is what our cladding is going to screw onto. To secure this to the van, I'm using these 30mm self-tapping metal screws. So they basically just don't need any pre-drilling, and it makes it quite easy to attach those. But yeah, we're just sort of trying to juggle rolling out the insulation, putting the ribs in to hold it there, and just moving our way down the van. So essentially with this Amatalin, we're skinning the entire inside of the van, or creating a cocoon. So we're going to get that up there at the moment. We've got some gaps, but we're going to completely seal that. We'll put some tape or some extra insulation in there as well and get it airtight as well all the way around there. But yeah, we'll keep rolling through that way.
I wish I knew how much I miss not knowing that we're all screwed when we play our roles and ignore the problems. I wish I knew.
Well, we've now finished the insulation on the wall, so that's the final stage of insulation there. All our ribs are in, ready for cladding. We've got our mounting points here for our bed rail. All the cables are nicely hidden away now. Only a little bit of blood was spilled today, so I nearly put the drill through my fingernail. I think that's probably going to come off. Other than that, everything actually went pretty well, and I'm pretty happy. It's looking a lot neater in here. We've still got a bit of cables hanging around here from the ceiling, but yeah, overall the van's starting to really come together now, and I'm really feeling, I don't know, it's starting to feel more like a home than what it was before. So yeah, it's pretty big progress in one day. Next we're moving on to the bed rails, but it's really hot, it's getting late. We're going to call it a day and pick this back up next weekend. We're back, and today we're going to start framing up the bed. So for that we've got some 35 by 70 mil structural pine. I'm just going to run this through the thicknesser. Not essential, but it's just going to give it a bit of a nicer finish for those bits that are visible under the bed.
I wish I knew.
So at the moment we're just working off the SketchUp drawing to work out the height of our bed rails. So this is the cross section of the back of the van. This is the top of our bed rail here, 954 mil. So we'll go to 955 there. So we've marked out on the rails where those bolts are going to go through to those nutserts that we put in. And at the moment I'm just working out what size holes. So we want to countersink a hole for the washer and for the head of the nut, and then be able to get a socket in around that. And then we want a hole for this as well that's going to be fairly tight but give us a little bit of flexibility to be able to move that and get it in place. I've opted for a 28 mil hole for the first countersunk one, and then a 13 mil hole for the bolt. Little trick when you're cutting timber, mark your waist side just with a line and then cut on that side of the line, and you'll always get the right length. All right, we're doing a bit of a test fit. Just the height. A 955. Very beautiful. And 955. And so is that one. And that one.
It's a pen behind the ear for me.
So we've got our bed sheets in which is 17mm structural ply, just as a bit of a dry fit. We've got to pull it up a bit tighter, but we're just working out the cutout we need here, so just making a bit of a template. So I've just worked out how far over the end of the rail it's hanging there, and we're using that, and then the width of this just to work out how much we need to cut out of the end of the ply, and then hopefully it should pull up flush on the other end. So we did our first rough in with those measurements just on a sheet of cardboard. That's that there. I did have a crack at trying to trace around it as well, but decided against that. But then from that I just worked out how to improve that slightly, so just tweak the measurements slightly. Now that shape there, which is going to fit around that quite nicely. And on the other side there's a bit of a handle, so cut that out there. Done another test fit after cutting that out, and it is looking pretty nice. Even this little notch for this handle has just turned out really nice. Brooke's gonna shut the door and see if it closes. Should be able to. Yep. And nice. Pretty pleased with that. This is what we're using to help support the bed. So it's 20mm square hollow section, 2mm thick wall. I went to a specialist steel place to get this. I just wanted it a little bit thicker in the wall, and I wanted the square hollow section to be as thin as possible because I was trying to minimize how much headroom we were losing above the bed with the bikes going in under them. And this is my latest acquisition, which is a $40 Facebook Marketplace special. So this is a cut-off saw, and it's really good for getting clean and straight cuts, so no more cowboy cuts with the angle grinder. So yeah, we're going to cut these to length and fit them for the bed frame. I didn't mention it's also galvanized, so we don't have to paint it. We don't have to worry about it rusting. Pretty happy with how that fits. So with our spacing, we've kind of got a bit of a random spacing, although it is a little bit thought out as well. So we've gone 3 on the back sheet, then I've put 3 more in right there, and then I couldn't put any more in forward because the slide out table is going to be there. And just with trying to minimize the height, I haven't been able to put any more supports in the middle of that next sheet of ply. So at the end of that, we'll have a support, so we'll have some built-in framing there that'll help support the bed. Our bed base is sort of half sitting here at the moment, and before we take it all out, I just thought I'd talk around it a bit. So there's always a bit of discussion around fixed bed versus a bed that you can change into a lounge and things like that. We went with this option firstly because of the mountain bikes and the way we wanted to store them inside. It wasn't really practical to have a bed that you could take in and out. And the other reason was when we had a camper van, so we had that High Ace in Tasmania, it had the option where you could convert the bed into sort of a lounge seating area. Once we converted it into the bed the first time, for the whole 2 weeks, we never converted it back. So I don't think we really need that option. So with the bed itself, it's quite thin with the design I've gone for. So we've got 20mm square hollow section and then 17mm ply. So we've got 37mm thickness for the actual bed base itself. And the reason for that is because the bikes going in here take up so much height, the bed ends up being quite high as well. And then I wanted to minimize how much headroom we were going to lose above the bed, so I've tried to make this like as thin as possible. I spent a fair bit of time working through this design in SketchUp and just trying to tweak it as best as possible to try and get the bikes in with a little bit of clearance and then maximize how much space we had above the bed. But this is kind of what it's going to look like. We'll paint this. We've got to take these sheets out. We'll drill ventilation holes in for where under the mattress is going to go. But yeah, that's kind of how it's going to go. We're going to put some supports in on the corners of the bed rails. At that end, there'll be some support there as well as we frame up the end of that. And then we're going to have a bit of a gap where the table will slide out. But yeah, we're going to move on to cutting some leg supports for the rail because I'm not completely convinced that the bolts are going to hold that long term. So we're going to put some additional screws in, put some supports in at each corner. Let's move on and do that now. So we're now putting the supports for the bed frame in, which we're using that same 70 by 35 pine. And to fasten those into the rail, I'm using some 100mm battens, which should sit in there pretty nicely. I'm also making sure to leave enough of the ribbing so that we can put cladding on both sides of that. This is all feeling pretty secure, but we're still going to fasten it to these ribs using some 40mm wood screws. We've cut our first sheet of cladding, which is this 12mm ply, and this is the piece that's going to be behind the bench seat. So the rest of our cladding is going to be pine shiplap, but this is the cladding that'll be behind the bench seat, so it won't be visible. And at the moment I'm just working out what size holes and where they need to go for all our cables to come through, because under the bench is where all of our solar equipment and batteries is going to be. We've now sorted all the cables, so some of them we labelled too far up the end of the cable, and then some, annoyingly, I haven't left enough cables, so I'm going to have to extend those later on, which is going to be a pain. But now we're screwing this off with some 25mm wood screws. Exciting to see the first bit of cladding going up, even though it won't be visible. We're now onto framing up the bench seat. So all of this I've designed in SketchUp, so it was just a matter of cutting everything to length and following the drawing that I've got in SketchUp. So now it's just a matter of basically assembling this flat pack. Calculations right, it should fit just here. That's what it's made for.
Nice.
The framing for the seating went in really nicely. I'm just going to talk about the design of it a little bit. So the height was all dictated by the height of the bed and the table, and we based that on the height of our dining room, chair and table, and that was all dictated by the mountain bike. So the seat's a little higher than we wanted, so here we've got this extra support in here, and on that we're going to build out a little footrest that'll fold down. I've left the end off the frame here, and that's because of the length of the batteries that'll sit end to end, so the battery at the back is going to sit through the back of that. So we've cut the lengths of timber to frame off the end of the bed right next to the shower, and I'm just using a pocket hole jig to screw the top member of that bed framing in, and I thought I'd show that because it's quite a cool little tool. So all you do is set the gauge on the side to the thickness of the timber that you're drilling through. There's a drill bit as well, and you set this collar based on the gauge at the bottom for the thickness of the timber, and then clamp it onto the end of the timber, drill it through. So there's those pocket holes there, and that allows you to join a piece of timber through the end grain. And here's one I just did a test on. So you can see I put a screw through there. You can screw in through the pocket hole and the screw comes out like that. So this little bit of framing at the end is in. The 2 pocket holes went in there. Got some 100mm batten screws in here, and then 50mm batten screws go straight into the ply. Because the pine we're using is 35mm and the ply floor is 15mm, those 50mm batten screws work perfectly when the pine is laying that way. Alright, so we're going to leave it there with the framing side of things. We've got all our ply ribs in. We've got the framing in around our bed, the bed rails, the bed's in, support rails are in. We screwed the galvanised steel sections in as well, so that in engineering transforms it from a simply supported beam to a fully fixed beam, meaning there's going to be less deflection. We're going to screw that down as well. We've framed up our bench seat. That's not screwed in, but we will screw that in some point in the future. Thanks for watching. Next up, we're going to be moving on to the shower and toilet.